everybody, and good morning. This is Eric Spell, Senior Practice Leader at Charles Aris Executive Search. We're coming to you today with a continuation of our Ag Tech podcast series. And we're fortunate enough today to have Scott Oler, who's with Mercury Agriculture Resources. And Scott has had a long-standing career in the dairy industry. And Scott, welcome aboard. Welcome today. And please tell us an overview of your role in the organization you have.
Sure. Thank you, Eric. I'm happy to be here. I always enjoy these types of things, and anytime we can advocate on behalf of agriculture, it's always a good thing. So we're a marketing and consulting agency. We started up back actually officially probably October of 2023. I left the corporate world in April of 2023, and I really like marketing and help people understand their value proposition in the market and their positioning and what the value they can bring to particularly the dairy producers. That's where I've spent my career. I grew up on a dairy farm, managed a dairy farm, been in dairy pretty much my whole life. So it's something I enjoy and I'm very passionate about. So after leaving the corporate job in April, it was just one of those things. I wanted to keep contributing to the space, and I think the best way we can do that is through marketing and consulting. We have a deep background in ag, and as a couple examples on what we do, we're working with someone right now who they have a good market base, but they're looking to expand, and their question to us is how do we penetrate the market deeper? How do we engage more customers? And so we're helping them go through that. And then I'm actually just in the sort of the beginning stages of a conversation with a startup company who wants to enter the market. So if you want to enter the market, if you want to expand your market, if you need to understand how to do your brand positioning or what your value proposition is, those are the things that we work with folks on.
Awesome. Well, there is a lot happening very quickly in the dairy industry right now. And Scott, as technology continues to evolve, what notable advancements have had a significant impact regarding the on-farm dairy technology sector?
You know, this is so fascinating to me, and here's why. I grew up, as I said before, on a dairy farm in Iowa, and so my view into the dairy world is I can remember we milked cows by hand in the morning before we went to school. I'm aging myself a little bit, but and then I can remember in the 70s we had surge bucket milking buckets, and my dad got electronic pulsators, and I remember how thrilled he was to have an electronic pulsator on his surge bucket milker. So I've seen hand milking, bucket milking, and then in 2008 I was working for Delaval, and I had the opportunity to help launch the VMS into the U.S. market from a technical standpoint. The engineers, some of the technical engineers and technical team and installers, we were responsible for getting it into the U.S. It had already been launched in some other companies. I think it was going in Canada at the time. So we got hand milking, electronic pulsator, and now a robot. And you know, to me, it's just really fascinating to watch this. And if you look at some of the things that's been happening, particularly in the parlor, you know, we had basic ID, and then we had activity collars, and then we've gone to rumination collars, and now we've got rumination and eating, and it went from the leg to the rumination collars. Of course, there was activity and ID only on the leg tags, but and now there's ear tags for rumination, and now there's boluses that we're putting in the cow that's giving us activity and body temperature and cattle location and health metrics. You know, so it's been a lot of fun for me to go all the way from the beginning, you know, thinking about milking cows on that little milk stool in the barn, to looking at some of these farms we're dealing with today, milking tens of thousands of cows with automation and all the things that's going on there. You know, but the other there's different avenues here though as well. If you look at the different partnerships, you know, I wrote an article that I sent out not too long ago, and I referenced Delaval and John Deere and the two companies having an initiative together. You know, and I think that kind of stuff is really just excellent for the industry, particularly the dairy producers, because, you know, there's so many pieces of data. They're getting their herd management system. They might have some other input information they're trying to get, and they're going to all these different software pieces, and to see companies working collaboratively to try to bring that data into one space, and they can. We got a ways to go yet as an industry, I think, but we're making strides. But also, technology goes beyond milking equipment, software. I can remember when my wife and I managed the farm in the late 80s and early 90s, we put in some of the first electronic milk meters at that time from the company we were working with. And, we were thrilled just to get a milk weight essentially. And we could move cows from pen to pen and know what pen they were in. And now, we're getting health metrics and rumination metrics and eating metrics and all of the things that go along with that, and parlor metrics. So the data that's coming to the farmer on these platforms is it's phenomenal. It puts a lot of management tools in their hands. But I'll just mention a couple of other points as well. Feed technology. If you look at a product like methionine, Adiseo, as an example, has a methionine product, two methionine products that they primarily sell through the dairy industry. And the technology is based in the rumen. Either it'll pass through the rumen or it'll pass all the way through the rumen, or it'll absorb through the rumen wall. And depending on what you want to happen with that product, that's the product you choose. So, and then they're affecting things like protein and fat in that dairy cow, which can ultimately directly affect the impact of the milk check, right? Which is really exciting in my opinion. And then there's products out there that people are doing with managing vet supplies and inventory control on the dairy farms. And so, there's all this technology that's coming in different avenues that it'll be really beneficial for the dairy producer. So I know that was a long answer, but there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to talk about here, actually.
Well, one interesting thing you mentioned about years ago when you were with your wife. I know early in my career when I was recruiting college graduates, if I saw they had a dairy farm on their resume, well, I'd get really excited because I knew the work ethic that they had at the time. They worked really hard. It's like detasseling corn. I enjoyed seeing that on people's resumes in college. So the next question is, you talked about some of the technologies that are out there today, Scott, but what technological advancements do you believe are needed to further enhance and revolutionize on-farm dairy technology, and what challenges or opportunities exist within dairy on-farm technology today?
So I think there's a few points here actually, and a couple that maybe don't often get thought about, at least in my opinion, in working in this space. ID in the parlors, it's gotten a lot better, but I think if you look at a dairy milking, 30 or 40,000 cows or more, and they're doing tag management. It can be, and in many cases on these large dairies, it is an ongoing issue. The cows, depending on how they're managing their tags, whether it's a collar or a leg tag. Ear tag, not so much, because once you put those in, they're essentially in, but there's still a lot of collars and leg tags getting sold out there. So managing those tags becomes a little bit of a challenge for some of these dairies. It's necessary, they got to do it. But if the tag don't get on the cow, they don't get ID'd, right? And then there's other ramifications for that as well. So, but we see other technologies coming into the market. There's a company in Texas. They're actually more in the beef space right now, but I see on their website they show some dairy as well. But it's facial recognition for bovine animals. I mean, if the dairy industry can adopt a technology like that, in terms of identification into the parlor, and now you're not missing milk weights, and you're getting that data that you need coming into the parlor. Those types of advancements, in my view, is just really exceptional for the dairy producer, and can make things a lot easier for them. One of the other things, I've had the privilege of working for 3 international companies in my career: an Israeli company, a Swedish company, and a French company. And what's interesting to me is when we get into these discussions, everyone in Europe and overseas thinks that we have 100% Wi-Fi and internet availability everywhere we go in this country, right? But the fact of the matter is, you get on some of these large dairies with these lots, and they might have really good Wi-Fi in the office, but then you get out in the lots, and you don't have that Wi-Fi. And why is this important? Because if you've got leg tags or collars on a cow, or ear tags on a cow, and you're needing to get information from those lots into the computer, and you have sketchy internet, it can be a real challenge for dairy producers. And I've talked to some over the years that say, someone's been on my farm wanting me to go to a cloud-based software, but I don't feel like the Wi-Fi technology is quite there yet. So I think, while we all enjoy our internet and our Wi-Fi, I think when it comes to the ag space, particularly when we're dealing with large lots and large freestall barns and these types of things, I think there's some benefit that can happen with the Wi-Fi. You know, I think this goes to your question as well. The opportunity for enhanced training for these software. There's the software platforms, the herd management. Whether it's the DC 305 or Del Pro or any of those. There's so much information and data coming at these dairy farmers with these platforms, and I think there's room for a lot of training to these dairy farmers. I mean, if you go out and listen to the dairy producers, and I do that a lot actually, and you listen to what they're doing, there's just a fraction of those platforms that they're using. So they've made this investment and they're getting one piece of it, but there's so much more power behind those platforms. And I think, it's not that the companies are doing a bad job. I'm not suggesting that at all. But what I'm saying is that there's room and opportunity to do more training so that these investments that are getting made on these farms, they get more benefit out of them and better decision making as the data comes. So I think those are some important, maybe often overlooked areas when we talk about these things that get overlooked, in my view.
Very interesting. Talking about bringing technology to the on-farm dairy, what advice would you have for, say, some startups that have an idea and they want to bring some new technology to the dairy? What would you say to these individuals?
I would say a few things actually. Being someone who was a product manager at one time in my career and managed product managers at one time in my career, time to market, it's way slower than we anticipate. We get these ideas that we're developing these products, and they work really well in our controlled laboratories, and then we go put them on farms, and they don't really perform or might not perform the way we think. And in fact, I was having, just as a side commentary, I was having lunch with a guy that sits on the board of directors for 3 startup companies. And we were having this very discussion, and he said that's one of their challenges is, the time it's taking to get some of this technology to market. And people, I think, sometimes aren't necessarily prepared for that, especially if you're in an ag startup and maybe you're making an investment into ag and you don't necessarily have the background in ag, but it's an interesting space and there's a lot of opportunity for advancement in the technology. So that time to market and software even can be an equally arduous challenge, because at one point in my career I developed and launched a software for service on dairy farms. And we thought we were going to do it. I can remember presenting it to the executive team, and they asked me how long it was going to take. And I will tell you, my target on what I said and what developed was considerably off, because you test and you test and you test and you test, and what you think works in your office building, and then you take it out to a dealer organization and to dairy farms, and then you find all the bugs in it, right? So it just takes a lot of time. The other thing I would say is durability. And going back to the lab, I've been in personal conversations where you're talking to the research and development folks, and they say, well, we've tested in the lab and everything looks good. And then I remind them of the harsh conditions that we're going into on these farms, manure and teat dips and acids and soaps and water and humidity, and in my opinion, one of the harshest environments maybe that we can go into. And I think sometimes these products that we bring to market, we're not quite prepared for the harsh conditions that we're going into. So do proper testing, be prepared for the investment, both in people time and money investment. I think, oftentimes, and the guy that I was having lunch with on Tuesday this week referenced this, you plan your investment to get these products to market, and it takes longer, and then you run out of money to keep it going. It can be a real challenge, particularly for a startup company. So, time, money, and conditions, and be prepared, because it's a longer journey than we think we're getting into when we start.
I heard someone say last week, and this was a private equity company, said that anyone wanting to bring new product or new technology to the dairy industry needs to first understand what the dairy producers' margins are, because the value proposition's got to be there, because they're very thin margins in the dairy industry. So another question, what talent gaps are being exposed with this rapid pace of technological change in the industry?
I think young people in agriculture is the first thing that comes to mind. And why is that a technological gap? Because if you look at the technology that's coming, and the shortage of young folks wanting to come into this space, I can remember sitting in conference meetings maybe 10 years ago and having people say, we're going to have a severe labor shortage in ag in 8 or 10 years or 12 years. And you're sitting in those chairs at that time and you think, yeah, maybe, but now we're living it, right? And as technology continues to develop, we need these young, strong minds to come in and help us keep that technology going in the market. And I think, getting that message out to software engineers and mechanical engineers and electrical engineers and others that may not know the advancements in dairy, the dairy and agriculture are making in the technology. I think, that's one of our exposures in technology is, we're an aging workforce particularly in the dairy industry, and the technological changes and talents that are needed. In my personal opinion, while it's not necessarily a technology, it drives all of the technology, and we need those young, bright minds to come help us make sure we get delivered properly to the dairy farmer. So,
Very good. One last question, Scott. What's one piece of technology or output of technology you couldn't go without in your day-to-day business?
well, since we're a marketing and consulting firm, data. I'll answer it that way, right? I mean, data is so important. Um, but I'll just kind of expand on this a little bit. There's different avenues of that data that we have to think about. I was on a dairy farm in California not so long ago, and I was there on a little bit of a tour, and they happen to be a dairyman that have multiple locations, and they milk several thousand cows in those locations. And we got into the subject of data and collars and tags and software, and they didn't have any. And he said to me, he goes, Scott, it's just too much data. I can't manage these many thousands of cows with all this data coming at me. And I said, well, we have to think about these things differently, because really it's management by exception, right? Because if you've got X thousands of cows, you're only managing a certain number of those cows every day. They need bred, they need treated, they need some effort put towards them. So, it's that data that keeps us all moving in this world, right? And so I think it's true for all of us that while sometimes we're overwhelmed with technology in a way, right? So we have to figure out how to use that technology in the best way, and that data. And for me, data is critical, because if I don't have data, we don't understand the markets, and we can't help the folks trying to expand the market or get into the market. And those are all relevant things. So for me, it's data.
Yeah, and the ability to make decisions on that data. So,
Exactly.
well, Scott, it has been absolute pleasure having you join us today. If any of our listeners wanted to learn more about information about yourself or about your organization, how would you direct them?
You can find us on our website, mercuryagresources.com. That's probably the quickest way. Otherwise, Scott.Oler at Mercury Ag Resources will get you as well.
Thank you again for joining us. And for those of you that'd be interested in learning about this, you can go to charlesaris.com and follow our other podcast as well as this one. And we thank you again, Scott. Have a good trip to World Ag Expo.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.